Okay, so here we're looking at exhaust. This is an exhaust manifold. So its job is to direct exhaust away from the engine. All right, now why do we have all these different types of exhaust? We have straight pipes. We have headers that go on the manifold that collect and bring it down in a more smooth fashion to a collector and then out the exhaust pipe. So why do we have all these different types? Your three-man, you've got these independent stacks coming right off the heads, which is pretty cool. What's the function? The point, pardon me, the point is to reduce back pressure, okay? Back pressure is it's something that's always there. It's not something we need. Now, there are some myths out there that, oh yeah, you need a little bit of back pressure. Let's just talk about what back pressure is. So back pressure means that when the piston is pushing out exhaust, it has to push it around the exhaust valve, through the head, through the manifold, through whatever type of exhaust system we have. And that restriction creates a pressure that pushes back on the piston. So if the piston's trying to push exhaust out and the restriction's pushing back, it makes it harder for that piston to push it out. That means that it's taking horsepower away from the engine. So how can it be a necessity? How can it be a good thing? Well, it simply isn't. We'll talk about, anytime we get rid of the back pressure, we're saving horsepower. It's always a good thing. But let's talk about a few examples about what people say. So sometimes you'll hear people say, well, if you don't have back pressure, your valves will float. Okay? So if you have valves floating, what that means is there's a point in the engine where, so we have our intake valve, our exhaust valve open, and we're coming up an exhaust stroke. So piston's coming up an exhaust stroke, exhaust is closing, and that piston has reached the top. And you still have that combustion chamber space to get rid of exhaust. So the intake opens up a little bit, and both those valves are open at the same time. Okay, it's called valve overlap. And we do that so that the airflow from the intake can kind of scavenge out that exhaust and push a little bit out into the exhaust and clean up that combustion chamber where the piston can't go up and push any more out. You got this combustion chamber space. So that valve overlap is supposed to be there. But what can happen at high RPMs is there's so much scavenging of air that the valve springs can't pull the valves closed so the intake stroke would start, and that exhaust valve would stay kind of held open a little bit, and we'd lose some of that intake out the exhaust. So you need higher springs on these high RPM engines so that they can close it. Now, that's, I guess, a little side lesson there, but it relates to this myth that do we need back pressure so that doesn't happen. And we have to think, if this is my exhaust valve that's starting to close, and the problem is that the scavenging of air kind of holds this exhaust valve open a little bit, how is extra pressure pushing on that which is holding it open going to help it from floating? Right? It's not. It's going to make it worse. So if we take back pressure away, it lets that spring close it, and you're not going to get valves floating. So I hear lots of people say that. It sounds like they know what they're talking about, right? Oh, if you don't have back pressure, your valves float. Okay, that doesn't make sense. We just have to know how it works. Second thing that kind of proves this a little bit is two things. I've had a number of engines on vacuum systems in the shop, and in that case, I remember one time I had spark plugs out. So I took the spark plugs out. I was just doing a tune-up and had the exhaust fans on. And so the exhaust fans are on. They're turning. And I hear this whistling. Oh, where's that coming from? Here, it was coming from the spark plug hole where I had taken out the spark plug. And the air was moving so fast past the threads that it was whistling. And I put my thumb on it and kind of sucked my thumb down. And I got thinking, well, geez, there's not any back pressure in this situation. It's actually, I said you're always going to have some if you're pushing exhaust out, but in this situation, I didn't have any. I had a vacuum, and I was physically sucking out the exhaust so hard, in fact, that it was making it the air whistle when the spark plug was out. So, do you have drivability issues, sorry, when you hook up an exhaust hose in the shop? Absolutely not, right? It's just sucking that exhaust out for you. And there actually are race cars out there that have vacuum exhaust systems. So they'll run a vacuum pump and suck that exhaust out. So they have an absence of restriction, and they have a vacuum. So there's absolutely no back pressure to the point of vacuum. Okay, so yeah, it's just simply a myth. You don't need back pressure. So the better you can get exhaust out, the more horsepower you save. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you can start hacking things up and pulling oxygen sensors out, because you're going to affect your fuel delivery and your computer system management. But if you have pre-cat oxygen sensors in the right spot so that they can communicate with the engine what's going on with the burn, communicate with the computer system what's going on with the burn, it can control that fuel properly.